Adam Weishaupt was born in 1748 in Ingolstadt, a small Bavarian city. His father was a man named Johann Georg Weishaupt. Johann Georg was a professor of imperial law at the local university, which meant Adam grew up in a household where education and law were highly favored. But when Adam was only 5 years old, his father died suddenly orphaned and without a father. The young boy needed a guardian. That's when his godfather stepped in, Johann Adam von Eichstätt. Now, Eichstätt was a very big deal in Bavaria. He was a nobleman, a high-ranking government official, and a professor of law. But at the same time, Eichstätt was a passionate believer in the Enlightenment, the intellectual movement sweeping through Europe that championed reason, science, and individual freedom over religious dogma. Eichstätt had a massive, private library in his home. For a curious kid like Adam, this library was a gold mine. It was filled with books that were practically illegal in highly conservative Bavaria. We are talking about French philosophers like Voltaire, writers who openly questioned the power of kings and the church. Adam spent his youth hiding away in Eichstätt's private library, devouring these forbidden books. By the time he was a teenager, his head was completely filled with radical ideas about freedom and equality. But there was a huge problem. While Adam was reading these radical books at home, his actual education was being run by the Jesuits, the Catholic religious order that completely controlled the school system and the University of Ingolstadt. To the Jesuits, the book Adam was reading in his godfather's library were poison. They believed in strict obedience, religious dogma, and keeping a tight lid on any free-thinking ideas. This created a massive friction in Adam's life. He had to sit through classes run by priests who he felt were keeping people ignorant on purpose. He grew to absolutely despise them. He saw them as intellectual jailkeepers. Despite this tension, Adam was incredibly smart. At just 24 years old, he became a professor of civil law at the University of Ingolstadt. This was a massive achievement, but it was also a declaration of war. He was the very first layman, meaning a non-priest, to hold a chair in canon law at the university that the Jesuits had run for centuries. The Jesuit establishment was furious. They saw this young, secular professor as a threat to their power. They did everything they could to make his life miserable. They harassed him, tried to turn his students against him, and actively sabotaged his career. Adam realized very quickly that he couldn't fight them out in the open. If he tried to preach his Enlightenment ideas in his lectures, the university would fire him, or worse, the state would arrest him. He realized that if he wanted to change his society, he had to build something secret. But there was another trigger that forced Adam's hand. It wasn't just that he hated the Jesuits. He was also terrified of losing his best students to a rival group, the Rosicrucians. At the time, a highly mystical, spiritual branch of Freemasonry called the Gold and the Rosy Cross was becoming incredibly popular in Germany. They promised their members magical secrets, alchemy, and ways to talk to the spirits. To Adam, this was absolute nonsense. He didn't just dislike esotericism and the occult, he utterly detested it. He genuinely believed that the things like magic, alchemy, and spirit summoning were a giant scam designed to take money from poor, desperate, and gullible people. He saw it as just another way to keep people blind to the real world. So imagine his anger when he noticed that his brightest, most promising university students, the young minds he hoped would help him reform Bavaria, were lining up to join the Rosicrucians. They were being seduced by the mystery, the secret handshakes, and the promise of hidden knowledge. Adam realized he had to act fast. He needed to build his own secret society to intercept these students before the Rosicrucians got to them. he decided to use a clever tactic. He would create a society that looked mysterious, exclusive, and secretive. But once the students joined, they wouldn't learn magic or alchemy. Instead, he would teach them hard science, rationalism, and political philosophy. He was going to fight the occultists by stealing their playbook. But Adam had a major practical problem. He was a young professor with very little money and no real resources. He couldn't afford to build a massive network of secret meeting halls across Europe from scratch. So he came up with a highly strategic plan. He would hijack Freemasonry. Freemasonry was already a massive, highly respected network of lodges across Europe. It was filled with wealthy elites, politicians, and intellectuals. Adam's plan was brilliant and highly pragmatic. He would have his followers join these existing Masonic lodges, keep their heads down, and slowly climb the ranks. Once they took over the leadership positions within those lodges, they would quietly steer the members towards Adam's radical philosophy. This gave him the ultimate safety net. If the Bavarian government or the church ever find out about Adam's secret radical group, they couldn't just crush it without attacking Freemasonry as a whole. And because Freemasonry was full of powerful, wealthy men, the Masons would use all their political influence to protect their lodges. By saving themselves, they would unwittingly protect Adam and his secret circle. On the night of May 1st, 1776, Adam finally decided it was time to start. He gathered just 5 of his most trusted students in a private room in Ingolstadt. Together, they took an oath of absolute secrecy to make sure they completely cut ties with their old lives. Adam gave everyone classical code names. Adam took the name Spartacus, after the Roman gladiator who led a massive slave revolt against the Roman Empire. His top student, Franz Xavier von Zwack, took the name Cato, after the ancient Roman statesman who refused to bow to Julius Caesar. Initially, Adam gave this tiny group a very dry, academic name, Bund der Perfektibilisten. In English, it's translated as the Covenant of Perfectibilists or the Group of Perfectibilists. The idea was that they would focus on extreme self improvement and education until they were mentally strong enough to help guide humanity towards a world where kings and priests were no longer needed. So, as they started talking about how to recruit more people, Adam realized that Covenant of Perfectibilists was a terrible name. It sounded like a boring university seminar. Adam sat down and wrote a letter to Zwack, Cato, suggesting a new name, the Bee Society. He rejected the Bee Society immediately. He told Adam that wealthy, ambitious men did not want to join a group named after common garden insects. They wanted a sense of power. They wanted to feel elite. So, obviously, Zwack insisted they go with an alternative name Adam had already written down in his notes, but overlooked it because he thought it was too foreign. The name is obviously the Illuminati. The name Illuminati comes from the Latin word illuminatus. It translated directly to the enlightened ones, meaning the ones who hold the light. Now, when he thought about it, he understood that it was the perfect psychological hook. It told prospective members that they belonged to a selective few who possessed a rare, brilliant light of truth, while the rest of the world was stumbling around in the dark. By 1779, 3 years after founding the group, the Illuminati was basically stalling. Illuminati was still looked as just a glorified reading club for law students in Bavaria. Weishaupt was honestly too academic to scale the operation. He needed a salesman, someone who was capable of recruiting the elite, the powerful members of the society. And in 1780, he found the guy he was looking for, Baron Adolf von Knigge. He was a wealthy North German nobleman and an incredibly influential, high-ranking Freemason. Unlike Weishaupt, who was stuck in his university bubble, Knigge was a man of the world. He knew everybody in Germany. When Knigge joined the Illuminati, he did two massive things that changed everything. Knigge completely redesigned the Illuminati's ranking system, making it into a highly sophisticated 13-degree hierarchy. He integrated actual, complex Masonic rituals into the lower levels. He opened the floodgates. Using his massive network, Knigge began recruiting from the absolute highest tiers of European society. Suddenly, the Illuminati wasn't just a club for university students. Under Knigge, the society grew to over 2,000 members. We're talking about dukes, princes, wealthy merchants, high-ranking judges, and even massive intellectual celebrities of the day, like the legendary writer Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. The plan was working perfectly. The Illuminati had successfully infiltrated lodges across Germany, Austria, France, and Belgium, quietly placing their people in positions of real administrative power. But this rapid success brought a massive problem. Weishaupt had created the Illuminati because he wanted to be the puppet master. He wanted total, unquestioned control. But as society grew, Knigge became more distant from Adam. He stopped responding to Adam's orders. The two men began to clash on almost everything. Weishaupt wanted to keep the focus strictly on radical, secular Enlightenment politics. Knigge, who loved the esoteric side of Freemasonry, wanted to keep some of the mystical, ceremonial elements to keep the wealthy nobleman happy. Weishaupt was furious. He did not want his society to become like Freemasonry, where wealthy members would gather, do some rituals, eat, and do nothing. So he started trying to micromanage Knigge, demanding reports and questioning his decisions. Knigge, a proud nobleman, absolutely refused to be treated like a student. By 1783, the tension turned into an all-out civil war. Weishaupt, in a fit of pure rage, actually began trying to sabotage his own society's communication lines. He slandered Knigge in letters to other members, withheld information, and refused to send updates to branches outside Bavaria. Knigge finally had enough. In 1784, he formally resigned from the Illuminati. With Knigge gone, everything was going very well for Adam. But the final, devastating blow didn't come from Knigge or a grand government raid. It came from the wounded pride of a man you were about to meet. There was a Bavarian academic and schoolteacher named Joseph Uchneider. He had joined the Illuminati hoping to gain access to the powerful elite, expecting fast promotions and insider influence. But Weishaupt, who was an incredibly harsh judge of character, looked at Uchneider and decided he just didn't have what it took. He found him intellectually shallow and refused to promote him through the ranks. This was a massive mistake because Uchneider felt very humiliated. Uchneider decided to leave the society. But he didn't just leave the society. He wanted the whole society to be destroyed. Schneider went straight to the Duchess of Bavaria and the government authorities. Because he had been inside the society, he knew exactly how it worked, who was in it, and where they kept their papers. He wrote a massive testament, laying out everything he knew. To make sure the government took him seriously, Schneider did what any good defector does. He took the truth and twisted it into something absolutely terrifying. He claimed the Illuminati weren't just a bunch of intellectuals discussing books. No, he testified that they were actively plotting to overthrow the Bavarian state, assassinate the Duke, outlaw Christianity, and replace the government with a tyrannical regime of their own. The Bavarian government, which was already incredibly paranoid about any kind of revolutionary talk, absolutely panicked and started to do anything they could to abolish Illuminati. Once Joseph Schneider went to the authorities with his testimony, the Bavarian government didn't just knock on the Illuminati's door, they kicked it down. It was a swift, brutal crackdown that pushed Adam Weishaupt out of Bavaria. In March of 1785, the Duke of Bavaria, Karl Theodor, issued an official government statement. It banned all secret societies, but everyone knew exactly who the main target was. They went to Franz Xaver von Zwack's house and found exactly what they were looking for: private letters and lists of high-ranking members, secret documents detailing the group's plan to quietly guide politics from the shadows. For the public, reading these confiscated papers in the local newspaper was like reading a sci-fi thriller. The government published the seized documents to show everyone just how dangerous this group was, which ironically only made the Illuminati look far more organized and powerful than they actually were. While his followers' houses were being raided, Adam Weishaupt was already packing his bags. He knew that as the mastermind, as the leader of the society, he wouldn't just face a fine or a loss of his job. He was looking at prison, or even worse. So Adam Weishaupt fled Ingolstadt. He slipped across the border, traveling under a disguise, eventually finding refuge in the city of Gotha. Luckily, the Duke of Gotha, Ernst II, was actually a quiet supporter of Enlightenment ideas and a former member of the Illuminati. Instead of throwing Weishaupt to the wolves, the Duke welcomed him, granted him asylum, and even gave him a pension and a quiet place to live out his days. Safe in exile, Weishaupt's life of active plotting was over. He spent his remaining decades doing what he did best: writing. He published book after book, trying to defend his ideas and clear his name. He just really wanted the whole world to know that he wasn't a bloodthirsty monster trying to poison kings or whatever, but a philosopher who wanted to free people's minds. He lived a very quiet, largely forgotten life in Gotha until he died in 8030 at the age of 82. This was the entire story of the Illuminati. But before I finish the video, I want to tell you, why is it that people still talk about Illuminati? Or why is it that they think that Illuminati rules the world? As I said, Illuminati was disbanded in 1785. But in 1789, just 4 years after the society was disbanded, the French Revolution erupted. The monarchy was overthrown. The king was beheaded. And the old feudal system of Europe was shattered. The elites of Europe were absolutely terrified. They couldn't accept that the common people had risen up on their own. They needed a scapegoat. They needed to believe that some hidden, highly organized group had planned the whole thing. There was these writers, French priest named Augustin Barruel and a Scottish physicist named John Robinson, published massive books claiming that the French Revolution wasn't a spontaneous uprising. They claimed it was a meticulously planned operation run by none other than the surviving Bavarian Illuminati. And just like that, Adam Weishaupt's secret society called Illuminati was resurrected in the public's imagination. The myth of the Illuminati was far more exciting than the reality. So, there you go. This is the reason why people still talk about Illuminati. Before I end the video, I want to tell you that the whole story of the Illuminati is very, very long. I didn't even told you how Adam Weishaupt planned to abandon the Illuminati altogether in 1783 to build a completely new society. Inspired by Zoroastrianism, he wrote an entire book around this idea. The potential name of that society would have been the Order of Fire. But again, there's a lot. So I just decided to make this video as short as I possibly could and most insightful as I possibly could. So I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned something new from it. Thanks for watching.